today we're going to take a look at how we can utilize the RowTest extensions plugin to reduce the amount of test noise which crops up when doing data range testing. This originally was an extension to the NUnit framework, which was not included in the distribution, and you'd have to go out and download it separately. But as of version 2.48, it is now actually part of the extensions DLL, which is now shipping with NUnit. So if you download 2.48 and look in the bin directory, you'll find a NUnit.framework.extensions DLL, which will have our RowTest extensions built into it. So what I want to show you today with RowTest is how you can take multiple tests and turn it into one test and reduce the number of test noise that you have within your test class. In our little simple made-up example, I have a rule here that takes a first name, a last name, and an enumeration as parameters to a method. Now I'm going to do some validation that says if the first name is empty, go ahead and throw an exception. If the last name is empty, do the same thing. Or if you provide an enumeration that is out of range, let's go ahead and throw an exception there. And then finally, if you give me all valid values, I will actually return you back the values, the first and last name formatted appropriately. Now, the way that we would do this test normally is I would probably have at least 5 unit tests to test the various pathways to this code. One to show first names null, last names no, one at the enumerations out of range, and then one for each of the valid happy paths. In our example here, I've only shown the exception pathways because I can't really test the happy paths with the RowTest extensions. I can only do it with the regular NUnit testing attributes. In our scenario here, since we do have 3, I do have 3 separate methods. One that will test, the first name throws an exception, one last name, one that the enumeration throws. And this works, and it works pretty well, except for now I have 3 tests that pretty much do the exact same thing, and I'm just adding to my test noise. Now, with RowTest extensions, I can actually reduce this from, say, 3 tests down to 1. So let's go ahead and create a test to show how we can do that. Now, instead of using the test attribute, I do need to use the RowTest attribute. And I'm going to go ahead and name this, with the name. And I'm going to go ahead and copy the logic from above. Now, the difference when doing a RowTest is I'm going to actually have to pass in values into my unit test. So let's create a parameter called first name, one called last name, and then we'll create one that is our some business class. We'll call it direction. Now, once I've created these parameters, let's go ahead and rename or replace. Now, in order to get the RowTest to actually work, what I need to do is use another attribute called row, and that will actually let me specify the parameters that I want passed in, along with a few other values. So I'm going to use the row, and if you look at the IntelliSense for this, you'll see there's a few different overloads, and the one we want to actually use is this bottom one here, where I provide a list of arguments. And the first example I want to provide is the one where both first and last name is empty. And then because I know this is going to throw an exception, I actually want to use the expected exception keyword here. So I'm going to say expected exception. And this is actually going to be argument null exception. So I've created my first test. This one here will eliminate the need for this one. I'm going to add another row to this where I provide a first name. But I'm still leaving the last name empty, so I'll still expect an exception to be thrown. And then finally, I'm going to provide both the first and last name. But I'm going to change the enumeration to be default, which should cause us to throw an exception. And then I'm going to change this to invalid enum argument exception. Now, by adding these 3 rows, I can essentially eliminate all 3 of these unit tests right here. And to me, this is much cleaner, much simpler to use and to look at and to read and to fully understand than having multiple tests and that each one, if they're all the same in the internal logic. So now that we have our test set up, what we'd like to do now is actually run it via the NUnit TestRunner. Now, unfortunately, I'm a ReSharper user, and the current build of ReSharper does not support RowTest. But I do believe that the current build of td.net does support it. So if you do have that, feel free to use it. I'm going to go ahead and use the TestRunner that's built in. Now, I've started the NUnit TestRunner here, and let's go ahead and just create a new project. Let's go ahead and add a reference to our assembly. And you'll notice one thing a little different. If you're familiar with the NUnit TestRunner, is where I'm using the RoadTest, it actually creates an indentation here to show me that there's one test that has multiple different runs in it. And they actually bring in the values that are in the attributes to show you right here, which is actually pretty nice and pretty slick. Now, if I run this, they all pass green. And I can get the same result if I run each one of them individually. But now instead of having 3 tests with exactly the same internal logic, I have one test that I provided the data via an attribute so I can run it over and over again, and each time producing different results. So as you can see, by using the RowTest, you can very simply and easily reduce the amount of test noise that you create while doing data range testing. If you want to check this out, like I said, it's in the NUnit.framework.extensions library. That's part of the 2.48 build of NUnit. You will find it very useful and very powerful. Thanks a lot. Until next time.